Hello, friends, and welcome to the Living Truth Podcast. This is Kristin Carey hosting today, and I'm really honored to be having this conversation with Sarah McDugal. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the Living Truth Podcast.
I'm glad to be here. It's exciting.
You guys, let me tell you about Sarah. I have followed her and listened to her content on social media for a while and have thought, wow, this woman has a lot of wisdom and insight. But I just got to meet her in person at the Sexual Integrity Leadership Summit. And as we talked, I was like, I need you on my podcast because she has so many amazing resources and things to say. So I'll tell you a little bit more about her. Sarah is a clarity coach and the founder of Freedom Navigator and Wilderness to Wild. She works with protective parents who are experiencing an unwanted divorce after reconciliation has become impossible. Parents who find themselves facing high conflict, divorce and custody battles. And so today, the first episode that we're going to do together here, we're going to be talking about learning to recognize the red flags of abuse. Sarah and I will record a second episode, which will come after this one, where we're going to talk more about navigating family court when a woman has to flee a destructive marriage. But for today, Sarah, I want to start just by asking you, what do you believe about marriage and why is this important for people to understand about you?
Thanks, Kristin. I love that you're starting with this question because I feel like it's very important to kind of establish a baseline, especially when we're dealing with just deeply painful and personal topics like abuse and divorce and high conflict custody battles and so on. I find it very important to state upfront that I am very much for marriage. Healthy marriage, safe, loving, godly marriage. But I am for marriage, even though I work as a coach for protective parents who are battling in divorce after abuse. I am for marriage and I am for healthy families. Unfortunately, sometimes the best way to be healthy is to be a one-parent family. And that is just an unavoidable fact in a world where there is sin and there are times when pervasive, unrepentant patterns of behavior bring us to the point of being forced to choose safety because reconciliation is just no longer an option. So that's where I stand.
I love it. And for our listeners, I just invite you to take a couple deep breaths because if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're resonating with what Sarah is saying, what I want you to know is that Sarah and I both have been there. Like this is a part of your story, Sarah. It's a part of my story. The unthinkable, being faced with choices that are crappier and crappiest. It's like, this is not what I wanted, but this is the best of the options. It's the only option for me to maintain my sanity. And nobody goes into marriage wanting to end it. So I know there's going to be women listening to this that are like, I don't want this to be my reality. And you may need to pause this episode and take a couple deep breaths and regulate yourself because this is hard work, but we are here with you. We get this pain. It's a difficult place to be in. So Sarah, tell me, what does it typically look like when a woman has truly done everything she can to reconcile? I find most women that I meet, at least, that come to me for help, they want their marriage to work even after things like sexual betrayal. So let's say a woman's done everything she can to try to reconcile. What are some of the patterns or behaviors that signal that reconciliation may no longer be possible?
I would say that this can vary from case to case. So I want to just say that up front. Your case is your case, right? And no one else around you can tell you, you have to leave. This is irredeemable. And also, no one else around you can say, you have to stay. You don't get to seek safety. Neither one of those are appropriate messages from people around you because they aren't living your life. And God's design for us is for us to live in homes, families, and marriages where the fruit of the Spirit reign: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, right? So when you are living in a marriage where those things are not present, you are living with rotten fruit. You are living with a, a baseline where perhaps, and again, this is going to vary based on your situation, but common patterns are that there is no self-control, and that can show up in sexual betrayal, infidelity, addiction, where there is no kindness or faithfulness. And again, that goes back to the betrayal, sexual addiction, porn addiction, etc., where there is no love or joy, definitely not peacefulness and patience. Goodness and gentleness are not part of your marital environment or your home environment or how your children are being treated by the other parent. So when we look at marriages, especially Christian marriages, where this is the baseline that we know God has called us to, it's important to start with, instead of asking, how bad is it? Ask, is it meeting what God has set for us? So we often think about it as, well, he hasn't thrown me down the stairs or left me with a black eye. He's only thrown things at my head, so maybe it's not bad enough for me to seek safety. Instead, or let me give another example as well. He hasn't actually hired prostitutes. He just watches porn every night or multiple times a week, or tells me that it would be all better if I looked like his favorite porn star, or whatever the situation is. So instead of saying, well, is that bad enough? Ask the question, is that faithfulness?
Yeah.
Is it kindness? Is that self-control? And then we have to take it one step farther. And the next question is this a one-time mistake because we are human? Or is this an enduring pattern of behavior? Because abuse, when we're really talking about abuse, and let's just be honest, there's a lot of explosion in awareness about abuse in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years. 10, 15 years ago, when I was going through this stuff, nobody was talking about it. In the last 10 years, there's been a lot of increase, but the last 3 years, it's exploded. So there's so much more information out there. And we are kind of at risk of calling everything abuse. Everyone's a narcissist, everyone's abusive, just because we don't get along, or because they take a lot of selfies, with their duck lips or whatever, and we're not actually, we're not actually using those terms necessarily with the best definitions in the most clinical way. So when we are looking at abuse, it's really important to define it well. Because if abuse is defined as a bad event or a bad mistake, then we are all abusers, because we have all screwed up colossally at some point or another. If abuse is losing your temper at your kids at the end of a really, really, really awful day, then you're an abuser too. So abuse can't just be being human, because we know that we are all human, right? Abuse has to be more than that. But at the same time, while so much of the world is over-defining abuse by lumping everything into it, over-defining narcissism by lumping everything into it, so now it means nothing because it's everyone. We also have, especially in conservative Christian environments and theological environments, we also have a tendency to under-define abuse, where it is not abuse unless you're in the hospital with a broken bone. It's not abuse unless there was forcible, violent rape, or you caught them in bed with another person and it's tangibly provable. because that's not an accurate definition either. So we have to look at abuse in the definition of it in a way that if we're in a Christian environment, I know you may have some listeners who are not participating in a faith community, or maybe they don't want to cling to religious structures. I totally respect that. I have a lot of clients that are in that as well. And the spiritual trauma and spiritual abuse has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you were raised in that, very often a lot of that sense of morality still is with you, even if you're not going to church, because it was pounded in pretty hard, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're around people who are like, well, it's not abuse unless you have a split lip. This isn't valid. It doesn't count. We have to define it better than that too. So abuse is an ongoing pattern of behavior where someone uses their power and their privilege to your hurt. It
I
is
love
a
that. That's
pattern.
a very clear definition. Why don't you
Yes. And
repeat?
so it can be anything.
Yeah.
Abuse is an ongoing, enduring pattern of behavior where one person uses their power and their privilege to the other person's hurt. Now let's break that down a little bit, because the problem isn't just power and privilege. We talk a lot, especially in the domestic violence arena, about, well, an imbalance of power. But is it bad to have an imbalance of power?
Not necessarily. I mean,
Exactly.
how the power is used and how it's
Yes.
agreed upon.
Yes.
Like a
So does
parent
that,
always has more power than children, but that
right.
power can be used for good to care for those children.
Yes. So if you are using your power as a parent to your child's harm, to your child's hurt, then you are abusing your child. And that is psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, physically, financially, medically, whatever it is. All power that we have given to us by God is to be used to protect and empower the other person, to set them free, to also follow their conscience to the best of their ability. So it does not mean that you have the power to use, well, if you're protecting them, then you're making all the decisions for them. That is to their hurt, because you are not empowering them to live in autonomy and free will under God's, like with their conscience before God, right? So we have to parse this out just a little bit. But if, you just said parents and children, a newborn has power too, though. There is nothing that is going to get a 25-year-old mom and dad out of bed every hour on the hour, all night long for weeks at a time, like the cry of their newborn baby.
True.
So a child has power. A bigger child on the playground may have power over a smaller child on the playground. A person with more wealth will have a different level of power than a person who is in extreme poverty. A person who has great influence is going to have power differently than a person who has none. A boss who makes decisions for a company will have power over their employees. It's not the problem of power. It's the problem, or not the problem, it's the dilemma of how the power is used. Is it used to protect and to set free, or is it used to harm and control? So a lot of times when people ask this question about abuse and the red flags of abuse, they want a checklist. Keeping you from leaving the room, taking away your keys, hitting you, smacking you, pinching you, forcing you to do things you're not comfortable doing, et cetera, et cetera. And those checklists can be helpful, but it's really helpful if we zoom out and we say, what are the core principles that make something healthy or abusive in the overall scheme of our life in general?
That is so helpful. And I do know that we have an amazing resource we can offer our listeners that we'll put in the show notes
Yeah.
that Sarah has created of red flags of abuse. So if you are a checklist person and you want that, you're
Mhm.
going to get it.
Yeah.
But right now, I want to ride this wave that Sarah's got us on of like, let's zoom out because I'm intrigued. Can you just tell me more about that?
Okay. Well, I mean, so if we zoom out, then let's look at things. Well, tell me here, is a lot of your audience Christian background?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I was a pastor's wife for 13 years. My
Right.
abusive marriage was in the pulpit a lot that time, all of that. So I was heavily involved in ministry. I'm a missionary kid. I was overseas in my teen years with my family, and I've been to 45 countries on mission trips and humanitarian aid things and that kind of thing. So, okay, the conservative Christian background is very familiar to me. That's where I was immersed and brought up and lived so many years in formal ministry work. Okay, so this is my natural language. Just making sure. Um,
It's great. We actually have a high percentage of women, like in our Women in the Battle membership, are ministry
mhm.
wives or were ministry
Okay.
wives. So you're going to be jiving with the people listening to this, I believe.
Okay, good. Well, so then let's go back to the Bible and what healthy relationships look like. Because you can move the goalposts a lot on what is bad. There are as many ways to be toxic and harmful as there are humans that can invent things that hurt other people. But God set a standard of what is good and healthy. So if we make that our benchmark instead of, well, I don't know if mine is bad enough because the other girl or the other mom in my group, her story seems so much worse. So maybe mine isn't bad enough. Stop comparing for how low you can get when the bar is subterranean. The bar is not on the ground. It is below ground level, right? I mean, we are below sea level on where the bar is if we're trying to compare to how bad things are. But let's look at what God says. So in every relationship, there should be 3 factors that are good and healthy. And just to give credit where credit is due, I learned these from my friend and colleague, Tom Pride, who is a high conflict coach at Banner Institute and the founder of Psalm 82 Initiative. So that's where this came from. It is not my original concept. So thanks, Tom, for teaching me this over the last decade. So every relationship is meant to have 3 results. A good relationship is going to make the other person feel fearless. If your partner is loving you well, you will be more fearless as a result of their love in your life. You will not be more afraid as a result of their love in your life. And this should spill over into what you feel you can accomplish and what you feel you can do in the outside world and your sense of safety and fearlessness of being protected at home and in your bedroom and in the kitchen. And whenever you are out and about together, you should feel more safe and more fearless because this person is your partner. And we have scripture for that. There is no fear in love. Perfect love casts out all fear. Now, that doesn't mean that you might never feel afraid. Things go bump in the night. Okay, well, that's scary. Maybe your child is facing a tremendous medical diagnosis, or one of you just lost your job and you're afraid financially. But those are things from outside that are affecting you, and you're supposed to be facing them shoulder to shoulder together. The for better or worse till death do us part is not until my partner destroys me or I die from the mistreatment or the autoimmune disease because I've been so neglected and harmed inside my marriage. So you should be more fearless as a result because love casts out fear when your partner is loving you well. And they should be more fearless because you are loving them well, right? two-way street. This is
Ab-
not gendered. This is not gendered. It may express itself differently based on the gender and the life work and the purpose and the interests of each partner, but it is not a male versus female experience. The second thing is freedom. So you're going to be more fearless when you are being loved well, and you are going to be more free. You are going to know that you are free to pursue what is healthy and good and safe. You are going to know that you are free to come home to a loving environment. You are going to know that you are free to bring up issues and questions and things that have hurt you and communicate, knowing that you can reach a conclusion and a solution on the other side without having to be scared, because you are fearless and you are free. You know that you are free because your relationship is rooted in what is true. And there's a verse for that. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. When your home and your marriage is built on truth and honesty, there's a tremendous amount of freedom in that. If you're here because you've experienced betrayal, then you know that there is a tremendous amount of bondage when you're living in an atmosphere of lies. When your partner is deceptive and manipulative and hides things and deflects responsibility for things and there is no truth, you are not free. So, healthy marriage, healthy relationship is going to be fearless and free. And the third is uncontrollable. Now, this is not out of control or dysregulated or not self-disciplined. This is uncontrollable. That means there's no price on your conscience. Nobody can control you because you do what you believe is right before God, not what pleases other people. So this uncontrollable thought helps to remove people-pleasing and fawning. It helps to overcome the sense of being trapped into doing things that you feel are wrong just so that the church doesn't find out. You're no longer covering for someone else's secret sins for the sake of public image because you are fearless, you are free, and you are uncontrollable. There's no price on your integrity. You're going to do what your conscience dictates is right. And when both partners are living this way, empowering each other to be fearless, free, and uncontrollable, then both partners are in the marriage because they both want to be here, not because Uncle Sam makes it too difficult and expensive to leave, not because, well, he's broken every vow he ever made, but I'm going to keep mine if it kills me. Not because, I guess I'll just stay for the kids because there's just nowhere else to go. And I don't have an education, I don't have a job. Because when you are healthy, you're fearless, free, and uncontrollable. And the verse for uncontrollable is in Acts 5. We ought to obey God rather than men. We don't do what people demand. We do what God expects.
Okay, that is so powerful. I love the picture that you paint of what healthy is. And I want to invite our listeners to just kind of sit with this. In fact, if you can, take a break, grab a pen and a paper and
Rewind.
write. Yeah. Mhm. Grab back and write down these things and ask yourself out of genuine curiosity, is this the kind of marriage
I'm in.
that I'm living in?
Actually, one of the show note links that we should put in is I have a free video series with the red flags chart. And it's free. It's even on a mobile app. So you can do it on the mobile app or you can do it on a browser. And I spend 15 minutes talking about each one of these things and going through the tools that are used by every abusive relational dynamic and the elements that show up in every relational dynamic that's not healthy. And I go through all of the pieces of the red flags chart, one short video on each area of everyday life where these things can show up. So it's completely free. And if you're listening and you want to really go through and dig down deeper than just this overview, that's there for you.
Thank you, Sarah. That is so fabulous. Um, okay. So I would say this is true for me, and I believe it is for you too. Like so many of the women who end up realizing, wow, there's no reconciliation in this relationship because it is abusive, because there are patterns of abuse, and because this person will not change. Why do you think it's important? Especially, I think about any people who are listening to this who maybe are the ones that have the addiction and are
Mhm.
really do want to experience freedom, and maybe listening to this episode incites some fear. Like, oh, if my wife hears this, she's just going to want to leave.
Turn
But the
this
rea-
up, delete that from the podcast series. Get that off our phone and our apps.
So, but the reality is, if you're the one listening and you're the one with that's had the secret sexual life, and you're trying to change your pattern and you're trying to become a healthy, safe person, you need to know that most partners want to fight for the relationship, want to have reconciliation. And I think this is important to know, that to not use fear, shame, and control as tactics to try to get your partner to stay, but rather to turn the mirror on yourself and to do your work. Because the reality is that most people want their marriage to make it. It's just often not even possible.
Take what you just said and flip it to the other direction too.
Yes.
Because
Yes, do it.
very often the betrayed partner wants so desperately for the marriage to work that they will spend at least a season of time using fear, shame, and intimidation to try to get the addicted partner to do the work.
And that doesn't
And
work either.
that doesn't work either.
Either.
That doesn't work either. It only works if both partners are fearless, free, and uncontrollable. So if you're the addicted partner, this will only work if you are uncontrollable, meaning you're doing the work because you want to do the work, not to keep her, not to prevent divorce, not to avoid losing half your assets, not because you're just scared of what people will think, but because you want to be a man of honor and integrity, and you're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. Because it only takes one person showing up in a marriage, determined to be healthy, to completely change the scenario. So this works for the addict or the betrayed partner. It only takes one of you deciding you are going to be humble, healthy, and do the work to transform the marriage. And it will play out one of either two ways. Either the other partner will be like, wow, I like these changes. I'm getting on board. Let's do this together. Or the other partner will be like, oh, hell no, I did not sign up for this. I don't want to be held accountable. Peace out, and the marriage will explode. Either way, you will get a transformed marriage. You will discover, when you stop trying to control the other person and you just work on yourself and your own determination to be healthy, you will discover whether or not the other person wants to be healthy enough to do their own work, and if they're going to join you on that path. But you have to stop controlling them, shaming them, guilting them. Do your own work and see if they join you and come along. Or you'll be set free, one or the other.
That's right. There is hope on the other side for those of us
Either
who
way.
work.
Either way. No, there's hope on the other side either way. There's hope on the other side if both come to do the work, and there is reconciliation and health and healing. And there is hope on the other side if your partner decides not to do the work and you go on to find health and healing without living in abuse. But there is hope either way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Um, okay, I have one more conversation or one more question that I want to ask you for this part of our episode, and then we're going to move on and record a second episode, you guys, because this is just so good. Thank you, Sarah. So, what does it look like to move from just a basic survival mode? And you've kind of already started talking about this survival mode, trying to just get through it, into a more strategic and grounded approach when it comes to, okay, I've heard this information about abuse. I recognize abusive patterns in my marriage. Maybe I'm reacting out of fear and trying to control the other person. Maybe that's what he's been doing with me. How how does a woman show up with a more strategic and grounded approach?
That's a great question. And it would be lovely if I could give a step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of answer. I don't
What if
really do
all of this
those
is
kind
linear,
of
correct?
answers. Pardon?
If only all of this was linear like that,
It
but
would
it's
be
not.
lovely.
It's
It
not.
doesn't work that way.
Right.
And that's why I tend to respond to all of these questions in principles, because you have to decide what you're willing to live with for yourself and how you're going to move forward. But principles for how to be strategic and grounded as you move forward. If you are recognizing, like, oh my goodness, this is giving me language for things I have felt in my body and in my nervous system, and maybe even in my medical chart. They've been showing up in all sorts of different symptoms and ways, but I didn't have language for it until now. And now I know what to call it, and it's destroying my world, and I don't know what to do. I've been there. And I want to go back to that principle of working on yourself. You may be realizing that you've been living with abusive patterns of behavior for a very long time. You may realize that in your coping with these, that you have ended up becoming conditioned to respond in ways that aren't the person you really want to be. And I'm saying that without judgment, because we tend to respond to our environments in ways that are trying to choose survival. And
And if we grew
sometimes,
up with abuse, if we grew up with abuse,
absolutely,
like that,
absolutely,
we may have developed like fawning patterns, people pleasing patterns that kept us in childhood, and it may feel like there is no other option.
right, absolutely. So without adding judgment to that, it can be important to open our eyes and say, how have I been conditioned to respond in ways that don't meet a healthy standard? And it's very, very possible that those coping mechanisms, those coping skills, are what kept you alive and kept you sane in very difficult situations. But if you want to move on without them, they will not serve you well in healthier environments. And if you want to be healthy, you have to figure out new ways, healthier ways to interact and build new habits and new patterns of interacting. So I'm not blaming anyone for the abuse they have received. I want to be very clear about that. And at the same time, we each have autonomy and we have agency, even if sometimes we haven't realized that we do. But if you are beginning to realize that now, it's really important to begin acting on that agency and autonomy that God has given you. Now, I do want to make one caveat right here. If you are in a situation where you have reason to believe that you may be physically in danger
Mhm.
by acting on agency autonomy, it is incredibly important to get a safety plan, talk to a domestic violence agency, get help from your local women's shelter or women's services before you start standing up for yourself, and then everything escalates into something that could be tragic. So please gauge the safety of your own situation and get safety planning help locally if that feels like it could be part of your situation. That being said, if if you're not scared of physical harm and you're simply working on yourself and you are free to do so, then your goal in being strategic and grounded is really to keep your revelations to yourself and take them to your therapist or your coach, and then move forward in what is healthy for you. Start putting into practice things that are healthy for you. Don't come in and announce, you're a narcissist. I have discovered that you are abusing me this way and abusing me that way, and this is that will not result in a healthy outcome.
No.
And it can escalate things needlessly. So talk to a safe and trusted person, preferably one bound by confidentiality agreements, about your epiphanies and your recognition and your understandings, and seek ways to carefully and wisely begin implementing these things, healthy boundaries and patterns in yourself. Observe and watch to see if your partner decides to follow along or has any interest in doing the work. And maybe they will, and that would be wonderful. And maybe they won't, and you will still be okay. And maybe they will, but later, and you have to leave first, and you watch from a distance. And that's also okay. Nobody gets to decide that path of whether to leave well, or stay well, or wait well, except you.
Is so important, especially for those of us who are getting toxic advice from, say, faith communities or family members who have very strong opinions. I agree with you, Sarah. We need to find our safe places where we can talk about our epiphanies and our discoveries about what we need in a place that we won't be judged or shamed, because that's the last
Yeah.
thing we need. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know before we wrap up this episode?
Hey, I want our listeners to know that patterns of behavior that are deeply entrenched take a very long time to change. And if you are determined to wait well or stay well, it's very important to do that with your eyes wide open. Be truthful about what your reality is so that you are not staying in just a mind-numbed survival mode, but you are staying with eyes wide open in your safe places with your safe people, calling it what it is, and you are making an informed decision about your future plan and how long you're going to wait. What are you going to watch for? What is acceptable to you? What is not acceptable? You have the right to set those parameters for your own process as you are watching and observing and making decisions. Every piece of data is just one data point. You have to zoom out to see where the whole pattern is. And that is especially important to remember with the pieces of data that seem like they are good. Because when someone does something that is good, when they apologize and take responsibility, sometimes we think, oh, it's better. It's going to be fine now. That is one data point. It is not the whole trend line.
And it can be a manipulation.
That is why you have to
Good
wait and see
manipulation.
if it's a trend line. We tend to say, oh, this is terrible, I should leave, if someone does something really bad. But when someone does something really good, sometimes we say, oh, this is going to be great now, I should stay. And we don't remember that it's just one data point. It was one action. One of my friends' dad says that when you want to know more about people, watch TV with the sound off. Mute everything they say and just watch what they do. Because if the words and the actions don't match, only the actions count. He says sorry, but he keeps doing the same thing. He says he'll take out the trash, whatever it is. I'm just using a random example. And promises, he says he loves you. You're the most beautiful thing in the world. He loves you with every fiber of his being, blah, 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 blah. Gives you a gorgeously written card for Mother's Day, and then is lying about where he's been, what he's doing, what he's watching. None of the good stuff counts if the actions are not backed up with honesty and integrity.
We always say, believe the behavior, not the words. Believe the behavior.
Yes. And in order to figure that out, journal. Somewhere safe that it won't be found, not under your pillow, not in a randomly accessible place, but journal, and it can be bullet points of what happened today. Keep track because your brain is wired to forget hard things in order to survive.
Right. To keep attachment. Your brain
Yes.
wants attachment for survival with your primary
Yeah.
figure.
Yeah.
And so you're right that we will have some betrayal blindness sometimes. And that's why it is
Oh, that's a great
important.
term. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not me. I think it's Jennifer Freyd and Michelle Mays.
I love her work. I love Jennifer Freyd's work. Oh my goodness, institutional betrayal and everything. So, I even look back, I go back and read journal entries from 15 years ago. I can't believe what I lived with. And I'm so thankful that I wrote it down
Right.
because I forget. I get caught up in living the moment. And I mean, of course, I'm not living in that now, so it's fabulous. But I forget, and you will forget. So in order to make informed decisions and exercise your autonomy and your agency, you need the facts.
Yeah. It's so good. Sarah, thank you so much. Listeners, we will provide the resources that Sarah mentioned in this episode in the show notes, and we will do a part 2. So I'm very excited for that. And if you are listening to our podcast and you have not yet taken a moment to write a review or to rate the podcast, would you take a second to do that when you finish this episode? That helps more people find the hope and the healing that we have to offer here at Living Truth. And until the next episode, I am holding out hope for you.